say I ruined my family, people think I'm being dramatic. I wish I was. I wish this was one of those stories you tell your girlfriends over wine about some almost mistake you backed out of. But I didn't back out. I didn't hesitate. I walked into the fire willingly and then acted shocked when everything burned. I'm 42 now, staring at the quiet walls of an apartment that still smells like paint because I moved here 5 months ago, and I replay the same moment every night. My husband standing in a doorway, eyes torn open, chest heaving, the sound of his world shattering louder than the sound of the door slamming into the wall. There's no version of the truth where I'm the victim. There's no version where I get to pretend I was confused or lonely or tricked. I was selfish. I was bored. I wanted to feel wanted in a way that made me feel young again, even though the man at home had wanted me with the same intensity every day for 2 decades. Daniel and I met at 16, and he fell for me so stupidly fast it scared me. He was all sunburned skin from soccer practice, messy hair, crooked grin, and I was the soft, anxious girl who didn't know why a boy like him would stare at me like I was magic. He asked me out with a folded piece of notebook paper he couldn't even hold steady, and from that moment on, he treated me like a partner, not a trophy, not a convenience, an equal. At 19, I got pregnant. At 20, we got married, and for years, we raised our kids shoulder to shoulder. He worked long days as an electrician, came home sweaty and exhausted, and still helped with dinner, laundry, bedtime, and somehow had enough left to look at me like he was still 17 and terrified of losing me. I loved him. That's the ugliest part of all this. I really did love him. But somewhere between 4 kids, stretch marks, PTA meetings, and losing myself in routine, I started mistaking comfort for suffocation. Daniel was steady, safe, reliable, affectionate, and I twisted that into boring in my own pathetic, restless brain. When I turned 39, I had a crisis I pretended was a health journey. I hit the gym every morning, yoga every evening, Pilates on weekends, ate clean, counted every calorie, punished myself for every pound until I dropped almost 50. Suddenly, the world noticed me again. Coworkers complimenting me, strangers staring a second too long, women asking me what my secret was. And Daniel? He worshipped me. His hands were always on me, waist, hips, back of my neck, touching me like he couldn't believe I was real. But instead of wanting him more, I started resenting him for wanting me. He'd kiss my shoulder in the kitchen, and I'd stiffen, pretending I was tired. He'd pull me close in bed, and I'd turn away, convincing myself fatigue was the culprit. The truth? I didn't want easy love. I wanted the thrill of being new to someone. That's when Adrian showed up, like the universe decided to give me the exact temptation I wasn't strong enough to resist. New senior manager, mid-30s. Confident in a way that made people automatically straighten their posture around him. Clean-cut beard, expensive cologne, watch that screamed, I have something to prove. He learned my name fast, used it often, said it in a low voice that made my skin warm in ways I didn't want to admit. He didn't flirt at first. He just noticed me, really noticed me, when I wore my hair different, when I changed my nail color, when I stayed late, when I looked tired. When Daniel dropped by the office once with coffee and breakfast, kissing my temple, Adrian saw the whole thing. After Daniel left, Adrian smirked and said, Your husband's a lucky guy. I should have ended any possible path right there. Instead, I blushed like an idiot. What came after was slow and calculated. Casual conversations turned into inside jokes. Inside jokes turned into late-night messages. Late-night messages turned into accidental touches, fingers brushing when handing off a file, his hand on the back of my chair as he leaned over to review something, his knee bumping mine in meetings. Every time his attention drifted my way, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not loved, not appreciated, seen. It's pathetic how little it took. The day it truly crossed a line, we were working late. The office was quiet, lights dim, city humming outside the windows. I was finishing a campaign deck when he walked in, loosened tie, sleeves rolled up, eyes tired but focused on me. He wandered behind me, leaned down to look at my screen, and the heat of him at my back cracked something in me. "You ever get tired of being the one holding everything together?" he murmured near my ear. My breath caught. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He saw everything he needed in my silence. He didn't kiss me then. But the moment he walked away, I knew I was screwed. Over the next weeks, the tension got unbearable. Daniel would kiss me goodnight, and I'd lie awake thinking about Adrian's voice. I'd check my phone mid-dinner like a teenager, praying for a message that shouldn't exist. I hated myself, but not enough to stop. The day he kissed me, I had gone to a cafe determined to shut things down, end the flirting, fix my marriage, be a decent human being again. Instead, before I could speak, he pulled me toward him and kissed me like he already knew I'd cave. And I did. I melted into it with a kind of hunger I hadn't felt since I was young and stupid and in love. I broke everything in that moment, whether I admitted it then or not. That night, Daniel kissed my forehead before I left the house. He told me not to stay too long at work, said he'd save dinner for me. I told him I loved him. Then I turned off my phone and drove to a hotel where Adrian waited. One night turned into dozens. Occasional slips turned into a routine. Guilt turned into excuses. Excuses turned into resentment at Daniel for still loving me. And me, I became someone I didn't recognize, a woman who could lie while looking her husband in the eye and still sleep next to him afterward. I convinced myself I'd end it eventually. Fix things. Go back to being the faithful wife everyone believed I was. Then one afternoon, Mark, my brother, showed up at my office unexpectedly. He looked at me with this heavy disappointment I hadn't seen since we were kids. "He cried to me?" Mark said, jaw clenched. "Dan came by the shop asking what he's doing wrong. He thinks you're cheating. Tell me he's wrong." I said nothing, and silence is an answer. Mark shook his head and said the words that should have snapped me out of everything. "You're acting just like Mom." I didn't stop. I doubled down. And the night everything detonated, the night Daniel walked into that house and saw me with someone else, that night started with me telling myself it was one last goodbye. It wouldn't have mattered if I believed it, because fate had already decided it was too late. And the cost for what I did, I hadn't even begun to pay it yet. I told myself I was ending it when I drove to his townhouse that night, which is hilarious when I think about it now, because nothing about how I walked into that house looked like someone trying to save a marriage. I was dressed in the kind of way you'd never wear around your husband after 20 years. Tight dress, lace underneath. Perfume I knew Adrian liked because he'd once leaned in and said, "That scent should be illegal on you." And I'd left the house with the same lie I'd used 100 times. Big project, running behind, don't wait up. Daniel kissed me at the door, palm warm on my cheek, and said he'd clean up after dinner and crash early. Told me to text him when I took a break so he'd know I was alive. I nodded, promised I would, then deliberately turned my phone off in the driveway before the guilt could get too loud. Adrian opened the door shirtless, low-slung sweatpants hanging on his hips, like some cruel joke the universe cooked up just to twist the knife further. "Took you long enough," he said with that lazy smirk that had once felt charming and now just felt dangerous. I pushed past him into the living room, arms folded tight over my chest, heart hammering. "This is the last time," I told him, trying to make my voice hard, decisive. "I mean it. I can't keep doing this. I want my marriage. I want my family, Adrian." He stepped closer, the heat of his body swallowing up my personal space in one smooth move. "If you wanted your marriage so bad, you wouldn't be standing in my living room with your phone off and that look on your face," he murmured. His fingers brushed my arm, slow and familiar, and my skin lit up like it hadn't gotten the memo we were done. You can say whatever you want, Lex, but your body's honest. It's been honest with me since day one. It's pathetic, but he was right about one thing. I was split in half. My head knew exactly what I was throwing away. My chest hurt with how much I loved the man at home. But my body had tasted adrenaline, obsession, the thrill of being pursued by someone new, and it wanted another hit. Addiction is ugly no matter what it's to. Mine just happened to be another person. This isn't love, I snapped, trying to armor myself in anger. This is lust, and ego, and boredom, and whatever else. You know that, right? Of course it's ego, he said, unbothered. Of course it's lust. But don't insult both of us by pretending you haven't loved being wanted like this. When's the last time you walked into your house and felt your heart slam into your ribs just because your husband looked at you? It wasn't a fair question. Daniel's love had years behind it. Adrian's had months and no responsibilities. Love with history doesn't come wrapped in butterflies and sparks every time you walk into a room. But Adrian knew which buttons to press, and I let him press them. We're done after tonight, I repeated, but my voice was softer. He smiled a little, not triumphant exactly, but sure, like he already knew how this scene would end. Then let's at least be honest for once, he said, and kissed me. It wasn't that the kiss itself was some mind-blowing cinematic thing. It was that I let myself lean into it like it was the last mouth I'd ever taste. That kiss turned into hands and clothes, and that tug-of-war between guilt and desire that I'd been losing for months. There was nothing gentle about it that night. It was rough, frantic, two people trying to consume each other so completely that reality couldn't wedge itself in between. He pinned my wrists above my head on the guest bed, his mouth on my neck, and I arched into him, nails clawing at his back, not because I'd never experienced anything good with Daniel, but because this felt illicit, forbidden, pulled out of time. I wish I could dress it up as some deep emotional connection. But it was selfishness, pure and simple, with a romantic filter slapped on top so I could live with myself. At one point, when his grip tightened on my hip and our bodies moved in a messy rhythm that made my brain go white at the edges, he murmured against my skin, "He doesn't know what he has. He doesn't touch you like this, does he?" And instead of correcting him, instead of defending my husband, I shakily breathed out a no, because in that moment, being wrong felt good. We were in the thick of it when the sound that haunts my dreams cracked through the house, the front door opening. At first I thought it was my imagination, that paranoid part of your brain that always whispers, what if he finds out? But then I heard it again, door, footsteps, the creak of a floorboard near the stairs. Adrian must have noticed me freeze because he muttered, out of breath, "Relax, it's probably a neighbor's door or something," and kept going like nothing had changed. My blood went ice cold. "Did you lock it?" I whispered, fingers pushing weakly at his shoulder. He didn't answer. Another step, closer. The hallway. I knew my husband's walk. Years of hearing him come home at all hours had carved the sound into my bones. My heart started pounding so hard it hurt, breath coming in sharp little gasps that had nothing to do with what was happening in bed anymore. And then the bedroom door slammed open. Time didn't just slow down, it shattered. In the doorway stood Daniel, chest heaving, keys still in his hand, frozen mid-step. His eyes moved once, taking in the entire scene in one brutal sweep. His wife half naked, hair tangled, sheet barely covering me, another man's bare body on top of mine, skin slick, guilt practically steaming off the air. If there's a hell, it's not fire and brimstone. It's watching that exact expression come over someone who loved you more than they loved themselves. His face went blank first, like his brain had short-circuited, then broke apart in slow motion. His mouth parted, his eyes filled. That easy warmth he'd always had when he looked at me evaporated, like it had never existed. "Daniel," I choked, scrambling, my hands fumbling for the sheet. yanking it up over my chest like modesty meant anything now. My voice came out high and hysterical. "Oh my God, I can explain." "How long?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud at first. It was quiet, too quiet, like all the sound had been sucked out of his lungs and what was left were just those two words. My throat closed. "Dan, please." "How long?" he roared, and the explosion in his voice made me flinch. The man who had always kept his tone calm for me, for the kids, for everyone, yelled in a way I had never heard in 20+ years. It sounded like something ripping in half. I opened my mouth, closed it, looked at Adrian like he might help, because apparently my brain wanted to make bad decisions right up to the end. Adrian wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, sat back on his heels, not even really covering himself, and said like a complete idiot, "Couple months." He said it like he was bragging, like he'd won some sick competition. Then, because he couldn't help himself, he added, "If you'd been doing your job, maybe she wouldn't have needed..." He didn't finish that sentence because Daniel crossed the room faster than I thought possible and drove his fist into Adrian's face with a crack that I felt in my teeth. Adrian's head snapped to the side, his body collapsing off the bed onto the floor. I screamed high and raw, the sheet slipping, my chest exposed, but nobody cared about my shame anymore. Daniel didn't hesitate. He launched himself after Adrian, fists raining down like he'd been holding back 20 years of anger. He never had a real reason to unleash before now. Adrian swung back, landed a couple of hits. I saw blood burst from Daniel's lip, but my husband fought like a man who had just watched his entire life get set on fire. He wasn't thinking about charges or consequences or anyone's future. He was pure pain and rage in a skin suit. He drove Adrian into the wall, drywall cracking, pictures falling, his fists a blur. Every hit made this sickening sound, hard and wet, and Adrian's face started losing its shape with terrifying speed. I scrambled off the bed, sheet wrapped clumsily around me, nearly tripping as I tried to get to them. "Stop! Daniel, stop! You're going to kill him!" I screamed, grabbing his arm. He ripped it back, shoulder rolling me off like I was a bug on his back, not even fully aware of what he was doing, eyes locked on the man who'd just thrown his world in his face. I stumbled backwards, slammed my shoulder into the dresser, pain shooting down my arm. The fighting didn't stop. Adrian tried to get a knee up, maybe to push Daniel off, maybe to get leverage, but Daniel caught his wrist, pinned it, and kept going, knuckles splitting, blood smearing across both their skin. I did the only thing my panic-soaked brain could come up with. I climbed onto Daniel's back, arms wrapping around his neck from behind, legs trying to hook around his waist, using my whole body weight to pull him off. I could feel his muscles bunch under my hands, could hear his harsh breathing and the choked-off sobs slipping between gritted teeth. "Dan, please, you're scaring me. Stop, please," I was crying in his ear, begging like those words might rewind time. He roared, not words, just a sound, animal and wounded, and surged to his feet, grabbing my arm and throwing me off with more force than control. I flew sideways and hit the nightstand, the corner smashing into the back of my head, the world going white if only for a split second. When the room snapped back into focus, everything was quieter. Daniel wasn't hitting anymore. He was on his knees next to Adrian, who was on his back now, face unrecognizable, swollen, bloody, eyes already puffing shut. Blood pooled beneath his head, streaking across the hardwood. Daniel's hands were shaking as he patted down his pockets for his phone, fingers slipping on the screen as he dialed. He put it to his ear, breathing ragged. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled faintly from where the phone slipped to speaker and tumbled onto the floor. My name is Daniel Carter, he said, voice breaking on his own last name. I need an ambulance. I attacked someone. I think I broke his face. There's a lot of blood. Please, please send someone. He needs help. Listening to him confess like that, voluntarily, while the blood of the man I cheated with soaked into his jeans, did something to me that nothing else could have. He followed every instruction like the good, rule-abiding man he had always been. Roll him on his side, sir. Make sure his airway is clear. Daniel gently turned Adrian, careful despite the rage that had just fueled his hands. Apply pressure to the wounds, but don't press too hard on the bones if you think they're broken. He grabbed towels from the adjoining bathroom, pressing them against the worst of the bleeding, trying not to sob openly. Is there anyone else in the house? The dispatcher asked. His eyes flicked to me then, taking in the sheet barely clinging to my body, the bruises forming on my shoulder where the nightstand hit me, the raw reed on my arms from where I'd clung to him. For a second, raw pain flickered in his eyes, but he swallowed it back down. My wife, he said, voice bitter around the word. She's okay. I pressed my palm to the bump on the back of my head, feeling the throbbing pain catch up. The sheet slipped again, and I yanked it tighter, feeling disgusting, exposed in every possible way. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. The police will arrive shortly, sir, the operator said. I need you to stay calm. Do not leave the scene. I'm not going anywhere, Daniel said. The devastation in his tone made my eyes fill. He hung up only when the pounding on the front door started. Police, open up! Someone shouted. He slowly raised his bloody hands, set the phone down carefully on the floor, and backed away from Adrian, getting onto his knees in the hallway where they could see him. The cops swarmed in, guns drawn, then lowered them when they saw the scene. One man on the ground barely conscious, another on his knees, hands up, wife in a ripped sheet against the wall, mascara streaked down her face. The whole thing looked like some trashy crime show, except it was my life and my choices. They shouted questions, separated everyone. Paramedics rushed to Adrian, rolled him onto a stretcher, strapped his bloodied face in place. Someone threw me a blanket, but it felt pointless. There was no dignity left to protect. Did he assault you? An officer asked me at one point, nodding toward my bruised shoulder, misreading where the violence had gone. No, I jumped on his back, I said hoarsely. I was trying to stop him. He just threw me off. He didn't mean to hurt me. Saying he didn't mean to hurt me about the man who had just nearly beaten someone senseless for sleeping with his wife felt like a joke with no punchline, but it was true in its own twisted way. Daniel didn't resist when they cuffed him. He didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't try to justify anything. He just walked out past me, head down, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on some point I couldn't see. Our neighbors were already outside, drawn by the sirens and lights. Phones were out. People whispered. Somewhere in that crowd would be teachers, parents of our kids' friends, people who'd seen us as the stable family. Now they were recording the psychotic, jealous husband being loaded into a squad car, and I knew exactly how the story would be told. At the hospital, the consequences started to pile up in real time. Adrian was rushed into surgery. They used words like reconstructive, shattered, possible long-term damage. His soon-to-be ex-wife arrived and went for my throat as soon as she identified me, screaming about how I'd ruined her life and her children's lives, that my pathetic midlife crisis had turned her husband into a victim and my own into a criminal. She got a couple of good hits in before security separated us. Honestly, I didn't even raise my hands. I felt like I deserved every slap, every claw mark. My parents showed up, faces strained and gray. My mother looked hollowed out, the way she had when her own affair had blown our family apart years ago. My father looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Mark paced in the corner, jaw clenched, hands balled in fists, eyes flaring every time my name came up in conversation. Daniel's parents walked in eventually, too. His mother took one look at me and slapped me so hard my head whipped to the side. the sting burning into my cheek. "You did this," she hissed. "You turned my son into someone who has blood on his hands. I hope you never know a moment of peace again as long as you live." The thing is, I probably won't. That night ended with Daniel being booked, Adrian in intensive care, my kids refusing to speak to me, my father not saying a word, my mother trying to hold me together while looking like she wanted to disown her own reflection. I went home alone to a house that smelled like him and the kids and laundry detergent, and all I could think about was the scrubbing that would never erase the stain I just created on all of our lives. I showered until the hot water ran out, sank onto the bathroom floor in a towel, and tried to breathe through the fact that there was no going back. Not from this. Not from that doorway. Not from the sound of my husband's heart breaking while another man's sweat dried on my skin. People talk about karma like it's some cosmic scale you can balance with enough good deeds. I learned that night that sometimes karma is just the consequences you knew damn well were possible but chose to ignore because the wrong thing felt good in the moment. And that was only the beginning. The real punishment started later. Courtrooms, cold stares, empty chairs at holidays, kids who wouldn't say "mom" without flinching inside. The affair ended that night. My sentence didn't. The days after the arrest didn't feel real. They felt like I was underwater, watching everything move in slow, distorted motion while my lungs slowly filled. The police report, the news coverage, the mugshot, the hospital updates, all of it hit faster than my brain could process. One moment I was signing paperwork with, shaking hands. The next I was sitting in my kitchen, listening to my father tell my mother he might move out because he couldn't stand being in the same house where the daughter who embarrassed us this badly grew up. The trial moved quickly because the facts were ugly and obvious. Daniel confessed immediately, never changed his story, never tried to protect himself with excuses. He didn't even mention the affair at first, not until his lawyer practically begged him to say out loud what triggered the violence. The DA built the simplest narrative imaginable. Jealous husband snaps and brutally assaults another man. Pictures of Adrian's face filled the courtroom, each more horrifying than the last. Swelling so severe his eyes were slits, stitches webbed across his cheekbone, tubes taped in place, jaw wired shut, bruising so deep it looked black, not purple. My brothers-in-law kept glaring at me from behind Daniel's parents, and every time the prosecution said the assailant, I felt physically ill, because the man they were describing didn't match the one who used to dance with our daughters in the kitchen or patch skinned knees or rub my back when I cried during pregnancy. The worst moment came early in the trial. They played the 911 call. The sound of Daniel's voice was something I didn't think a human throat could produce. Wrecked, cracked in half, breath punching in short bursts between words. "I hurt him. I didn't mean. Please hurry. I'm so sorry." Hearing him apologize for the consequences of my choices was like having someone reach into my chest and twist. When the audio reached the part where he paused, looked at me lying on the floor holding my head, and said through broken breaths, "My wife's here. She's okay," I heard my father push his chair back violently and walk out. He couldn't listen to another second. I don't blame him. When it was my turn to testify, I felt like I was walking into my own execution. The courtroom was full. Daniel's family, my family, people from the neighborhood, co-workers who pretended they came to support me, but mostly wanted a front row seat to the spectacle. I sat in the witness chair, and they made me recount the affair in humiliating detail. Where it started, when it escalated, how many times, what days, what excuses I used, what signals I ignored, what lies I told. Every answer was like splashing acid on my own skin. I could barely bring myself to look at Daniel, but every time I did, his eyes were hard, jaw clenched, pain radiating off him like heat from asphalt. I watched him flinch when I admitted the affair lasted 6 months. I watched him close his eyes when I told them the last night was supposed to be goodbye. I watched him visibly sag when the prosecutor made me list all the places I met Adrian: hotels, parking lots, office rooms. It felt like I was burying him with my words while he was still breathing. And then came his testimony. My stomach twisted into something sharp as he took the stand. His voice was calmer than I expected, almost detached, like he'd practiced being numb. He told the same story he told the dispatcher. He came home on his lunch break to surprise me, saw my car parked outside a townhouse he didn't recognize, heard noises upstairs, walked in, walked down the hall, and saw me underneath another man. He said he lost control. He said he didn't remember throwing me off. He said he didn't intend to cause that level of harm, but when the prosecutor asked him what he felt when he saw us, something inside him cracked through the numb exterior. His voice wavered, and he looked at the judge rather than at me when he said, "I felt like I was watching my whole life get torn apart in front of me. I felt worthless. I felt stupid. I felt betrayed in a way that's hard to describe. I wasn't thinking. I reacted, and I regret it every day." He didn't cry often, but when his voice broke saying those words, I shattered with him. The judge handed down 7 years, less than the maximum, more than hope. Daniel didn't look at me when the sentence was read. My sons erupted, shouting, "That's not fair." While bailiffs moved toward them, my daughters sobbed into their grandmother's shoulder. I sat still, staring at the floor, feeling every second of that sentence carve itself into me like a lifetime. After the conviction, Daniel was taken to the state facility where my brother works, and that became another nightmare entirely. He refused every request I made to visit. I called the prison week after week, leaving my name, begging them to check again. Every attempt was met with, "You are not on the approved list." I wrote letters, hundreds over the years. Apologies, explanations, pleas, memories, promises. Not a single one reached him. They were all returned, sealed, unopened, as if he'd never even touched them. My kids started visiting him after a couple of months. My sons went first, 2 strong, tight-jawed young men trying to pretend they weren't broken. They'd come home afterward quieter, angrier, older. My daughters visited too, sitting across from their father in stiff plastic chairs under fluorescent lights, hearing him talk about school, boys, sports, college applications, their futures. They come home with wet lashes and smiles that disappeared the second they stepped inside the house with me. The silence between us stretched longer every month. My oldest son left for college. He didn't tell me the move-in date. I saw pictures through my mother. My second son followed. My daughters became seniors in high school. They talked to me only when necessary. Answers short, tone polite but hollow, like I was a teacher they didn't want to offend. Every holiday was a war zone of awkwardness and careful navigation. Daniel's side of the family refused to come to any gathering I attended. My family split down the middle. My father didn't speak to me for years. My mother would come over and quietly clean when she thought I wasn't looking, like she didn't trust me to keep anything together anymore. Money dried up. The affair and the assault became a local whisper network. I had to quit my job because the accounting firm saw me as a reputation problem. Every place I applied in my field mysteriously decided to go in another direction. I ended up working retail, wearing a name tag, and forcing smiles at strangers who recognized me from the news and pretended they didn't. During tax season, I worked at H&R Block, filing returns while people whispered in line about that woman from the assault case. I came home from long shifts to a quiet house, dishes still in the sink because my daughters were avoiding any interaction. I'd cry in the shower until my chest hurt, water washing nothing away. My therapist became the only person I could talk to honestly, and she didn't hold back. The first real breakthrough was when she said, "You didn't cheat because you were unhappy. You cheated because you wanted to feel desirable without doing the work of communicating your needs to your husband. You wanted the thrill without responsibility. You used attention as a drug." It felt like a slap. a deserved one. She told me I had become emotionally lazy, that I treated my marriage as a safety net while chasing dopamine hits elsewhere. She wasn't wrong. A year into Daniel's sentence, I got a call from Mark telling me that Daniel had been stabbed in the stomach during an attempted assault by another inmate. The inmate ended up with a broken spine because Daniel fought back. My brother's voice was razor sharp when he said, "You did this." I went to the prison infirmary and was denied again. I didn't get updates unless the kids told me. Daniel went into protective custody after the attack, isolated, alone, paying for a crime he committed because of a choice I made. The years piled on like sandbags. The kids graduated, visited him on holidays, formed new routines. When my oldest brought home a girlfriend from college and my mother showed me pictures of Daniel grinning, arm around her shoulder, I cried in the bathroom at work for half an hour. Then one day, after almost 7 years, the girls came home glowing. "Dad's getting out early," they said. "Good behavior." He was released in April. I found out not from him, not from the system, not from Mark, but from my kids' sudden happiness, the way they carried themselves a little lighter because their father was back in the world. For the next few months, they spent all their time at my brother's house, where Daniel was staying. They visited me occasionally, but only out of obligation. Then came the moment that gutted me the most. Their 18th birthday was approaching, and I excitedly told them I wanted to throw them a big celebration. They looked at each other and one said, "Can we do it another day? Dad's planning something for us that day, and we don't want you near him." That sentence slammed into me harder than anything in the trial. So I did the most pathetic thing imaginable. I went to Mark's house with a stack of all the letters Daniel had returned over the years. I knocked. Mark opened the door only a few inches. Behind him, I could hear laughter. My children, my brother, my husband, my family, a family that no longer included me. "Can I talk to him?" I asked, voice shaking. "Just for a minute." Mark glared. "He doesn't want to see you." But then I heard Daniel's voice, rough, deeper, older, say, "It's fine. Let her talk." When he stepped into view, the air left my lungs. He looked stronger but harder. His hair had more gray, his face more angles, something in his eyes colder but clearer. "Hi," I whispered, holding out the stack of letters. These are yours." He took them. My heart stopped. Then he shoved them back into my hands. "You forgot these," he said flatly. I broke instantly. Tears spilled. My voice cracked. I begged. I apologized. I told him I loved him. Told him I was sorry every day. Told him I wished I could undo everything. Told him I didn't want to fix the marriage. I just wanted to fix the damage. He listened without looking directly at me. When I finally ran out of breath, he answered, "I used to look at you like you were the best decision I ever made. Now I look at you and see the decision that destroyed everything. I don't hate you. I just don't want to know you." Behind him, all 4 of my children were watching. Their faces weren't angry, just empty, and that emptiness hurt far worse. Daniel turned, walked back inside, and Mark closed the door in my face. I stood there on the porch clutching the letters, crying silently while hearing my family laugh inside a house that wasn't mine anymore. And in that moment, I realized something. Losing Daniel wasn't the punishment. Losing the version of myself I used to be, the one he loved without question, that was the real sentence. And I deserved every second of it. After Mark shut the door in my face, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car in his driveway with the letters in my lap. Hundreds of pages I had poured my guilt into. Every apology, every ugly truth, every pathetic attempt to reach the man I broke. And I couldn't bring myself to start the engine. I folded over them like they were a dead body and let myself sob until my throat felt scraped raw. I'd spent years fantasizing about that moment of seeing Daniel again, and every version I imagined was delusional. I pictured him softening, maybe letting me say one real sorry. I pictured him giving me 10 seconds of the warmth he used to have for me. The real version was a man who had carved me out of his world cleanly, surgically, like a tumor that nearly killed him. After almost an hour, I finally drove home, gripping the wheel, so tight my fingers ached. The house felt even emptier than usual, like the echo of the laughter I heard from Mark's place still clung to me. I walked down the hallway and paused at the doorway of each kid's old bedroom. Beds made, posters fading on the walls, childhood stuffed animals shoved into corners, museum exhibits of people who no longer lived here. In my room, I dropped the letters onto the floor and climbed into bed without turning on the light. I stared at the ceiling, tears drying on my cheeks, and accepted something I'd been resisting for years. There would never be going back. Not to the family we were, not to the marriage I shattered, not to the version of myself Daniel once trusted. The next day I tried to move forward. I went to work. I kept my head down. I pretended the meeting at Mark's house didn't crush whatever hope I had left. But the truth was heavy in every step I took. I had spent years trying to rewrite a past that refused to be rewritten. My kids started coming by less after Daniel got out. They spent most of their time at Mark's or their dad's new place, which I later learned was a small apartment Daniel had rented 3 towns over, close enough to be part of their lives, but far enough to avoid me entirely. I didn't blame them. Why would they want to be with a ghost of a mother whose biggest impact on their lives was catastrophic? Summer passed quietly. I kept my job at the retail store, filed taxes for people who avoided looking me in the eye, ate alone, slept alone, existed in a kind of melancholy routine that felt like a life sentence. Sometimes I'd see Daniel around town, at the grocery store with one of the kids, or jogging early in the morning, earbuds in, head down. But he never looked at me. He'd just walk past, eyes fixed forward like I was air. And every time, it knocked the breath from my lungs. One afternoon in September, I was at the store restocking shelves when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Emergency. Call me now. My heart leapt into my throat. When I called, her voice was shaking. It's your father. He collapsed at work. They're taking him to the hospital. I left immediately, driving faster than I should have, praying under my breath. When I got to the hospital, the waiting room was full. My mother, my brother, even Daniel's parents for some reason, like they had simply become intertwined with us through years of shared grief. And then I saw Daniel. He was sitting with my kids in the corner, his arm around one daughter's shoulders while the other leaned against him. My boys stood beside him like sentinels. For a second, I almost forgot how things were, because seeing them all together lit up something instinctive in me. This was my family. Or at least, it used to be. The moment they noticed me, everything stiffened. My daughters' faces closed off. My boys looked away. Daniel's jaw flexed, emotion tightening the muscles in his neck. But he didn't say a word. How is he? I whispered to my mother. She squeezed my hand. They're running tests. An hour passed. Then a doctor finally appeared and told us my father had suffered a mild heart attack, but was stable. We all breathed again. My mother thanked Daniel for driving her there as soon as she called, a detail that landed inside me like another blade. He hadn't hesitated. He was still the man who helped people without thinking twice. Not for me, for her, for the family he still respected, for the people who weren't me. When visiting hours opened, my mother, Mark, and the kids went in first. I stayed behind, wringing my hands, waiting for someone to tell me to join them. No one did. After 10 minutes, I finally asked the nurse if I could see him now. She nodded. I stepped into the room quietly. My father was awake, pale, tired. My mother sat beside him, holding his hand. My kids stood near the foot of the bed. Daniel was against the wall, arms crossed, silent and steady like he'd done this 1,000 times. When my father saw me, his expression tightened, but not in anger, in sorrow. "Hi, Dad," I whispered, stepping closer. He stared at me for a long moment and finally said, "Sit down." I did. He took a slow breath. You think I stopped talking to you because I hated you, he said, but that's not it. My chest tightened. He continued, I couldn't talk to you because I didn't know how to look at you without seeing everything you lost, everything you threw away. I didn't know how to help you without enabling you. Tears filled my eyes. I'm sorry, I said, barely audible. I know. He looked at Daniel then, really looked at him, the way fathers do when they regret something deeply. Your husband. Daniel visibly tensed at the word husband. My father corrected himself. Daniel, he was the best thing that ever happened to this family, and you losing him was the worst thing that happened to you. I bowed my head. My father reached out and squeezed my hand weakly. But you're still my daughter, and I don't want to leave this world without forgiving you. The words broke something in me I didn't know was still intact. I pressed my forehead to his hand and cried silently. In the background, I heard a subtle shift of movement. When I lifted my head, Daniel was looking away, jaw set, eyes distant. The forgiveness in that room wasn't his to give. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After my father recovered enough to go home, my mother asked if I wanted to stay with them for a few days to help out. I did. It was awkward at first, old routines brushing up against deep wounds, but being around them felt less like punishment and more like purpose. One evening, as I washed dishes, I overheard my daughters in the living room whispering about college applications. One mentioned touring a campus with Daniel. The other said he was helping her with scholarship essays. They sounded happy, light, and for the first time I realized something deeply uncomfortable but true. They were doing better because I wasn't involved. I had become the person whose absence improved their lives. The next few months blurred by. Holidays came. I cooked for my parents. My kids dropped off gifts for them, but skipped me entirely. I got a small Christmas card from my daughters, signed with their names, but no message, no warmth, just a formality. Daniel didn't send anything. I didn't expect him to. By spring, everything began settling into a new version of normal, one where I was permanently on the outskirts of the family photos, the family gatherings, the family group chats. I never tried to insert myself again. I had finally learned that wanting someone's forgiveness doesn't entitle you to it. But the part that still rips me open came on a random Wednesday afternoon, months later. I had just finished my shift and stopped by a small cafe to get a tea. As I walked out, I saw a familiar figure across the street, Daniel carrying 2 coffees, walking beside a woman. She was around his age, maybe a little younger. Dark hair, neat clothes, kind smile, Adrian's ex-wife. And the way Daniel leaned slightly toward her as she spoke, the ease in his posture, the gentleness in his expression, the softness in his eyes. I knew what it meant instantly. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't broken anymore. He wasn't mine anymore. My breath caught in my chest like something sharp. I stood frozen, watching them walk together, talking quietly, naturally, like 2 people who had slowly found each other in the rubble of what I destroyed. They got into his car. He opened her door first, just like he used to do for me. A tiny shattered part of me wanted to run over and beg him not to give his heart to someone touched by the same affair that ruined ours. But the real part of me, the part that finally grew up, knew I had no right to want anything from him anymore. Love doesn't wait around for the person who broke it. It rebuilds itself with someone who deserves the pieces. I drove home that night in silence. No music, no crying, no screaming. Just a quiet acceptance settling into me like dust. I ruined my marriage with my own hands. I destroyed a good man. I hurt my children, and I lost the life I could have grown old inside. But the truth, the brutal, necessary truth, is that Daniel deserved a second chance at love. Even if it came in a form that twisted the knife deeper for me. Even if it came from someone tied to the same disaster. He deserved happiness. He deserved peace. And I deserved to learn how to live with the consequences of my choices. So now I move through the world differently. I don't chase forgiveness. I don't beg for attention. I don't cling to hope like a lifeline. I go to work, come home, cook for one, read in bed, visit my parents, and quietly support my children from afar without pushing myself into their lives. And sometimes, on nights when I can't sleep, when the memory of Daniel's face in that doorway flickers behind my eyes, I whisper a truth I should have learned years before everything collapsed. Some mistakes don't get fixed. Some people don't come back. Some bridges don't rebuild, no matter how long you kneel at the ashes. And sometimes the cruelest punishment is simply living long enough to understand exactly how badly you ruined the one thing that ever truly loved you.